Good friendly game. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our third guest speaker of our series for the semester, our last one for the semester. We have the good fortune of having Alan Turner with us this evening. Before I turn it over to him, I know that we have a number of high school students with us this evening. Mr. Marty Lear has welcomed you to come by and visit 176, which is just outside here in the hallway. He's got a class going on. So when this wraps up, if you want to see any of the digital animation classes in progress.
174.
Excuse me, 174. Please feel free to do so. Without much further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Alan Turner, who comes to us from Chicago, from Wideload Games, and he's got all kinds of good fun stuff to tell us about his experiences in gaming. Take it away, Alan.
Good evening, Ferris University in Grand Rapids. Thanks for having me down here. Like Ward said, I'm from Wideload Games. Anybody actually ever hear of us? All right, that's what I like to see. We made Stubbs the Zombie, which you just have to see the attract mode that's there with the game. Stubbs is a game where you get to play the zombie, and it was the first game that Wideload, the first game that we produced and shipped as a company. It's not the first game that the members of Wideload ever produced and shipped, because most of us were prior to Wideload, we were all Bungie people. Let me back up a little bit. My name is Alan Turner, and I'm an ex-Bungie man. I started with Bungie in 1996, I think it was. Bungie was real small at the time. It was a little shop in Chicago. It was in the Pilsen neighborhood in Chicago, and it was interesting because the first time I walked up into the place, it was in this old girls' school, and I had no idea what I was getting into as I came towards this very big, ugly, monolithic building. Rang the doorbell, came upstairs, and the first thing that I was aware of was this strong aroma of human sweat. That was my first interview day. It was one of these situations where they were just finishing a long crunch, and everyone had been working crazy hours, and many people hadn't gone home. There was a shower on that floor, but not many people used it. So imagine my dismay as I walk up and I open up this door and I'm like, whoa. And at that time I was interviewing for a tech support job, and the experience at Bungie was that it was small enough that everyone had an opportunity to have an effect on what the company was doing and the direction we're going. At least in those early days, we were like 14 or 15 people when I joined. I was like number 14 or 15, and it was this interesting environment where when we were in the old girls' school, that sounds kind of odd, but when we were in the old girls' school, tech support was in this one large theater space, and then the Halo team and the Myth team were in these two other rooms. But it was set up in such a way that we could very easily walk back and forth and check up on what each group is doing. So tech support was always in the ear of the Myth team, and the Myth team was always in the ear of the Halo team, and the administration and production was always in everybody's ear. So it was good times back then. We eventually moved from the Pilsen neighborhood to downtown Chicago, and we had this large. We were in a large building, but it wasn't our building, right? We just had like a floor, and that was where we began that process of ramping up from being this small company to this large company. And towards the end of that process is when we got bought out by Microsoft, obviously, and many of us moved out to Seattle, and some of us stayed here in Chicago. I was one of the people who stayed here in Chicago. Eventually went on to Day One Studios and worked on a game called MechAssault. Anybody ever play MechAssault? All right, I'd like to see that too. Worked on MechAssault. From MechAssault got shipped, and it was my first experience with one of the horrors of the game industry, where we had ramped up, got a whole lot of people on the project, and we're now on the point where we only need a few people to get the next project up. So a lot of folks got laid off. I was one of those people, and I was lucky at the time because Alexander Seropian, who was the CEO of Bungie, had finished his tour of duty with Microsoft as this acting manager with Bungie Microsoft, and he had come back to Chicago and was in the mood where he was bored and wanted something different. He wanted to do something. He wanted to start something else up, and so he heard that I was off work, gave me a call, called up a couple other people. We sat down, and that was the beginnings of Wideload. It was neat again because Wideload at that point we were 4 people in our own respective houses talking in virtual conference spaces on phones, coming up with ideas. Eventually, we moved into Alex's his attic, and did that for about 2 months until we all got tired of going to Alex's house. And we eventually got some space in Oak Park that we didn't really have enough money to do anything with the space other than come to work. We had stacks of boxes. We had these chairs that they were left over from the people who were there previously. So everything we had was just kind of like the big squatting experience. We had a handful of machines, and that was where we really started driving towards making our first game. We already had the idea of which game we were going to make, and that was Stubbs at the time. But it was in Oak Park where Stubbs started to become this beast that was growing into something that we would or would not control over time. And from Oak Park, we came to Chicago, and now our more or less permanent home is in downtown Chicago, where we are 11 or 12 people. I always lose track of that number. And we intend to stay pretty small. What we like about how things work for us is that we're small. There's very little politicking, and everybody has, again, that opportunity to affect the way the company, where the company is going. When we bring our process is basically to come up with ideas. We are always writing up these little treatments where if an idea pops in your head about something you think could be a cool game, write it up and put it in the box. And eventually we gather, have dinner, sit down, have lunch or whatever, and we go over all these ideas, decide which ones we think are cool, which ones we think are crap, throw the crap ones away, make fun of people, and then we move forward on the cool ideas. Stubbs was one of the cool ideas. It was almost a crap idea. It was one of these situations where we had this big box of ideas, and there are some that are much more accessible. There are some that were very status quo, and there would be a much easier sell. But then Stubbs had a certain charm that made us keep coming back to it. And eventually, when the vote came, we all voted on Stubbs. And I don't know if I mentioned this when I talked to the other class earlier, but the original idea for Stubbs was going to be kind of a sim-like RPG-ish game, this sort of a top-down game where you're this little zombie who lived in suburbia, and you were sick and tired of suburbia because people in the suburbs made fun of you, they spit on you, they kicked you. No one respected that you were the neighborhood zombie. You were a minority in the neighborhood, and so you had no friends, and so you, as Stubbs, you were going to go out and make friends, and the best way to make friends was to make friends. And so it was kind of a little bit of syndicate, a little bit of Peakman, just kind of this idea that you go out and take over neighborhoods, and the struggle was to take over one neighborhood at a time. And for a number of reasons, we abandoned that idea. One of the big reasons actually was that it was kind of unwieldy. For what we were trying to do, we needed to bite a smaller chunk. That could turn into like this big monster project that we would never finish. And we wanted to make sure that we couldn't afford to be spending 3 or 4 years on a project. We're not Valve. We don't have like hordes of money sitting around gathering dust. We actually have to ship something and ship it soon. So after going around in circles on the best way to approach it, we came back to more of a third-person action focus on Stubbs. And then it came back to, well, now that we're going to do this, how do we make Stubbs interesting? I mean, we've all watched zombie movies. And in zombie movies, zombies are typically what? Slow, lumbering, not interesting. They're automatons, right? They're not the thing you want to be. So it's very hard to walk up to people and say, hey, I got this great game where you get to be a zombie. And folks looked at us like we were crazy. It was a big struggle for us to get across the idea that you're a zombie, but you're not really a zombie. You're kind of like this zombie master guy who's making zombies. And so what we had to do with Stubbs was figure out where we were going to make allowances to kind of keep with some of the themes that we're going to go with. We wanted to really go for the black humor that you have in most zombie movies. If you sit and watch things like Revenge of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead, there's this point where you see it's really easy to spoof zombies. So what we wound up doing was making some concessions that would make Stubbs a fun person to play, but still provide you with that zombie experience that people would be expecting. So some of those things we did were Stubbs moves faster than most zombies you'll see in film or read about in books. He's more, actually, that's not true now because I guess all the zombie movies that have come out since we started working on Stubbs, all the zombies run now. But it was a big idea to us at the time. So we allowed Stubbs to run, and then we had to figure out this whole, if we let you make zombies, how do we keep that fun? It's kind of like playing chess, and every time you capture a piece, you get a queen, and that kind of ruins the game of chess real quick. So we had to figure out, do we actually give you zombies like yourself? Do we make your zombies really suck? And if we do that, then what's the point of giving you zombies? So we found this middle ground where we had to think less about making a game where you're building the zombie horde, and kind of turn it more into a puzzle game. And so the idea is that Stubbs is a game about chaos. You're at point A, and you want to get to point B, and there's all this crap in between, and all of it can kill you really quickly. So what your zombies are they're not really zombies as much as they're moving shields, and so you're creating these things that you can put in front of you to block all the damage you should be taking, and it's all kind of battlefield management, right? You make as many zombies as you can. The AI sucks, but we can get away with it because they're zombies. You know, so if you go around the corner and you see like a zombie humping the wall, that's cool because that's what zombies do. So we decided we had to figure out how much of the inherent Halo AI how much of the Halo AI we were going to adjust to bring the experience fully across. And what we wound up doing were, there's this idea that you can push your zombies, you can call your zombies, but nothing ever allowed you to have pinpoint control over what your zombies were doing. You were never in a situation where you're like lining up zombies behind you and then charging. It was you're charging and hoping your zombies are back there, and you're like, you come back and you whistle for your zombies, wait for your zombies to catch up, and the zombies like catch up fast enough, you push them. And so that's kind of cool because you're this anti-hero character in the first place, and then not only are you making your zombies, but you have such disdain for them that you're just manhandling them all the way through. They are your ammunition, but they're not your friends. Stubbs is also a love story for those of you who don't know. So by making those zombies these kind of moving shields, and that was sticking with that metaphor, it became a lot easier to find ways to make what zombies did interesting, what you did with the zombies interesting. The other thing we had to do was, we have a third-person game. We have a game where there's lots of other equipment and stuff out there in the game. We had to decide what the rule was between you and said equipment. And because people like to pick up guns and shoot people. I mean, in games. There's if you see it there, you inherently ask, why can't I use it? And so we had to. We never told you why stubs couldn't directly use things, but we set it up so that the way you use equipment in the world is to possess someone with the equipment. So that added this extra stealth element to the game, where now you're doing a whole other level of battlefield management, where you can build zombies, make your zombies rush forward, pull off your hand, throw your hand towards the back of the mob that's fighting you, possess somebody behind the group, have them start assaulting the group from the rear. They turn around and start fighting with that person. The zombies get in there, and you're just creating general chaos everywhere. And it's a very satisfying, I'm a badass kind of chaos. And that's it took us a while to get to that point. There's a number of times where we had this thing going on where you could temporarily possess people, and so you were starting fights, and it sounded cooler than it actually worked out. The idea was that you would be able to, I could throw my hand to the back of the room on somebody against the back wall, have him punch somebody, and then end the possession, and then just watch the chaos ensue as people started to fight amongst each other. Because we have this concept of teams that all the AI are on. So there's like a zombie team, there's a human team, there's a cop team, there's a scientist team, and getting people to see different teams as enemies or friends was part of the whole chaos thing. But because of the limits of time, what the engine limits, that again proved to be a very arduous thing to really make it work the way we thought it should work. So that kind of got abandoned. We moved back towards a very general, just possess people. They'll turn on you, they'll attack you, and that's pretty much it. And so it became more of a diversion technique than it became an actual chaos generating technique. And in the end, it turned out to be pretty fun. I think the other rule that we decided on was, how do you make zombies? If you're running willy-nilly through the game, making zombies with every time you kill somebody, they're always getting up to zombies. That kind of takes some of the fun out of things. So we wound up with this rule that if you kill something with one of your natural attacks, and we gave you plenty of them, the person that you killed could get up as a zombie. If, however, you kill somebody with a vehicle, or you're possessing someone and they shot somebody, if it wasn't one of your natural attacks by which they died, then they weren't going to get back up as a zombie. And that made for an interesting trade-off, because there are times later on where you see a lot of people and you're like, wow, I can build this crazy zombie horde, but in the process of trying to do it, you're going to get ripped apart. And so you're like, well, should I just get that guy in the car and just run all these people down? And there's a point where you have to decide between, you have to give up some of your zombie ammunition to be safe, and trying to get people to get you to walk that line while you're playing was where we're trying to balance the fun. So I think overall there were some areas that we weren't particularly happy with subs, and again, time was a big issue there. But I think overall the game that we shipped turned out to be a pretty fun game. It has limitations. There are points where I wish, in retrospect, that we could have gotten more intricate with the combat. But overall, I think it all pretty works. At some point, we'll be doing the stubs too. I don't know when it's going to be. We're not working on it right now. But I guess I can open up to questions for people if anybody wants to ask. Anything they want to ask? Let's see. About a year. Once we went into full swing production, it was about a year. We had a, let's see, February, March, April. We had about a 4-5 month period where we were actually building prototype. And that the prototype game was almost nothing like the game that shipped. But that was what we shopped around. So we got the prototype, went through a process of trying to find a publisher and shop the game around for a great number of months until we found a publisher that we could work with well. And then once we got money in, we went back into production. And that production was about a year. You know, Alex could give you more detail on that, but I'm pretty sure it was about a year. It felt like forever, but that's about when it was. I think there's somebody back there. Sorry. One of our goals was to do stuff that people aren't doing. Just, we didn't want to make another yet another corridor shooter. Excuse me. We didn't want to, make another Devil May Cry kind of game, another Ninja Gaiden kind of game. There's enough of that kind of thing out there. We wanted to play with different things. We wanted to play with the game mechanics that people were familiar with, but then find ways to turn them over and make them interesting. Do something new with them. In terms of actually deciding to do the zombie, I guess in some ways it was a challenge. When we had the list of ideas there, like I said, there were some that were pretty straightforward, and like Halo or a spoof of Halo one of our goals is to do funny games. But we got to a point where there's something about a zombie that it's such a thing you don't want to play that we figured there's got to be a way to take the fact that it's such a lame creature and make that work. And that was part of finding the funny. We had this rule of we never want to be in a situation where the only time you see funny stuff in the game is when we present it to you in a cutscene. We wanted you to be constantly part of the funny. Being a zombie, just me telling you you're going to be a zombie somehow suggested that a certain level of ludicrousness. So I think we just wound up taking that one step at a time into these other realms of what can we do with it. And eventually we wound up just deciding, say, okay, let's just stick with the zombie. Let's take the zombie as far as we can. Let's play this joke out. Well, not play the joke out, but let's take this joke as far as we can. And the zombie was kind of the low-hanging fruit. Did that answer your question? Okay. Yes, sir. A little bit of everything. Like I said, when we started Stubbs, by the time we actually got into production of Stubbs, we were 5 people. And we were 5 people through about the 55, 60% of the game process, the development process. We eventually ramped up to we got another 3 or 4 people on by the time we had shipped. But prior to that, it was pretty much myself and Matt Seeger kind of writing up a lot of the game rules. I was doing a lot of the level write-ups. So we eventually got Doug Zartman on, and he was also doing level write-ups. But I was managing a lot of general gameplay, what was going to be fun, what wasn't going to be fun, knocking heads with other designers over what wasn't going to be fun. Once we actually moved things out to subcontractors, the levels that I was focusing on, those levels got I had to interface with the contractors who were working with that, so I was part of the process of saying, hey, that environment rocks, hey, that environment sucks, you're fired, you're hired. And then same thing with audio. Matt Sell was our primary audio. He's our writer guy. He's the guy who's the man behind the story, and he controlled a lot of dealing with audio people, but there's still a process of I had to tell him what I needed for given levels, what was working, what wasn't working. Standing over artists when they're working on stuff, saying, "Boy, I really hate the way that subs looks. Can you make me another Stubbs?" And making them hate me. And so we all wear multiple hats at Wideload, and so everyone is in everybody else's business. we all know what the other person in their discipline is doing, but we're not limited to the discipline that we're focused on. So we're kind of all over the place. Yes, sir.
You guys had a great article in the Developer Magazine a few months ago.
Right, the postmortem article?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah, it was.
Was there any problems with that?
Yeah, there were problems, but the results outweighed the problems that we came across. It was a situation where we had the opportunity to, like I said in the previous class, we had the opportunity to fail horribly. We were trying out this new game idea. We're doing a game idea. We're doing a zombie survival game in a way that no big publisher would touch. It was the first game out as a new company, so we came out the garage doing something not what people would expect, because we came away from doing Halo and Mechasalt and doing something so unlike the stuff that we worked on previously. And then we were trying to define and manage a brand new, I won't say brand new business model, but new to the game industry and how we were trying to manage that business model. So we had all these factors working against us, and so we definitely struggled in various places to make things work smoothly. And there were a few hiccups. There's a couple places where we're like, duck and cover. But in the end, we did pretty well. We managed to ship a game with a very modest budget. I believe Stubbs is about $3 million. You'd be hard pressed to find many dev teams who could put out a game like Stubbs. And Stubbs is using some older technology, but we still managed to push something with a 12-man team and some contractors out the door that some companies require anywhere from a 70 to 100-man team to pull off. So we were pretty proud of that. And what's even nicer about that is because Stubbs cost us so little money to make, we don't have to make a whole lot of money to fund the next game that we're working on. And we never in a process where we have to manage this huge staff while we're bringing a game to prototype, right? That's the problem that the other companies have, where they rev up, they man up as they work on a project, and then the project is over and they need to go to the next project, and you only need a handful of people to get that project started, to get that project to prototype. And so they've got 60, 70 artists and designers and level people just sitting around, browsing the internet. And people get laid off, people get mad, nobody wants to come work for you anymore, and you get a bad name. That all sucks. So this way we've got our 12 people. Our 12 people are always working on ideas, and it's when those ideas hits a point where it's gold that we bring in people to work. And those contractors come in knowing that this is a contract. There's no presumption that you're being hired for any long term working at Wideload. You are coming in as a contractor. Chances are you're probably coming in as with a contract house, an art house or something. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So, and that helps us maintain relationships instead of pissing people off. And people get mad when you lay them off. And so it worked out pretty well. We're working on other projects right now, and I think it's because of the success we had with Stubbs and actually bringing it from paper to ship, that publishers who didn't want to talk to us before are knocking on our door saying, "Hey, wow, you guys made something crazy and with very little money. Would you make something crazy for us?" and that's good. So it was our baptism of fire. It was our proof that we could do it as a new entity. We never shipped anything as Wideload, though we had shipped things as Bungie and with other companies. So it worked. It really worked well. Lights are in my eyes. You, sir. How does Wideload handle internships? We have internships. I've talked to Ward about the fact that we have internships. Most of our internships are art and web-based right now. We don't have any design or programming internships, and mainly that's because that's part of our low-level process of creating our games. It's not something we're necessarily willing to intern out, but we're happy to have people come in and be part of that process as artists. There's no sense in letting code go and be accessed by somebody who it just gets all ugly, right? So it's artists and web people, and there's a contact person if you're interested. But the catch is you do have to be in Chicago. There isn't a whole lot of work from Grand Rapids to do what you want to do. But and Ward has that contact information. So if you're interested in getting involved with our internship program, talk to Ward. And it's pretty. Just before warned that we do get a lot of people who come seeking internships, and we look through a lot of portfolios. So make sure that if you are trying to get involved either on the website or on the art side, that you have a very polished portfolio. Cross your T's, dot your I's, because it's pretty competitive out there right now. There's a lot of schools are doing what Ferris is doing right now. Ferris is further along in many ways than some schools are. Some schools tend to focus on either the art aspect or the programming aspect, and Ferris is, I guess, somewhere in the middle. But it's the new sexy thing to do, right? Is to get in the game industry, and so a lot of schools are churning out people. So, be prepared to work hard if you do get it. Yes, sir. Everybody's got their own story. It wasn't like a big group. Screw you, Bungie. It wasn't. It was for me, it was. Bungie was moving to Seattle, and I'm married. I've got kids. I have a very strong foundation in Chicago for family support, just economic support. I've got a lot in Chicago that the cost of recreating that in another city, moving my whole family to another city, not being guaranteed that my wife would have work, it just didn't add up at the time. And even though Microsoft was paying well, it wasn't. They couldn't compensate for all those extra little things, and especially losing that support system. So I wound up just staying here, and that's what it wasn't like I hate Microsoft. Whatever. It was purely a familial decision. But if I had been single, or if married and with no children, I would have done it. I would have gone up, stayed with Bungie, going up to Microsoft and done my tour duty up there, and then probably eventually quit and come back. But so yes, sir.
Do you find that Chicago is a great area for game development?
It's becoming one. There's a point. Chicago is like this. It fluctuates. There's a point back in the mid 90s where there are lots of game companies in Chicago and around the area, and then there was the big console grab where the PS2 was coming out. The Xbox was being developed, and there's like this process where companies were being sucked up left and right, and people just kind of disappeared as all these companies moved out to the West Coast, and then it was just dry for a number of years, and now there's this return, and we've got in the downtown Chicago area, we've got Day One Studios that they MechAssault 2. EA opened an office, and it actually had this really snazzy big party they invited us all to see their big new snazzy EA offices, and it was pretty spectacular. It was like being backstage at a concert, and I was wild the whole time. So EA's there, Wideload is there. There are some smaller advert gaming companies like Snap to Play. There's a lot there, and not all the people who are there, and all the companies that are there are focused around console games. There's a lot of, like I said, there's advert gaming. There's serious game design work. There's opportunity. There's also some architectural firms I've come across. My sister works for one, and they're starting to discover that whole trickle-down effect of all this game technology that they can use for walkthroughs and selling designs to their clients. So it's starting to blossom. I wouldn't say it's a hotbed yet, but it's kind of warming up. Lukewarm bed. So, yes, sir. Right. Stubbs is all Halo. It's pretty much. So, I don't want to say Stubbs is the mod of Halo, but Stubbs is basically we took Halo, shook off some of the dirty parts, and then
then rebuilt what we needed to make the whole zombie thing work. But it's still very much at the core Halo. Yeah, we still have to pay the license. We hit no props from Microsoft. We're like, hey, hook us up. We got a game. It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be a zombie. You get to play the zombie. We want to use Halo because we worked on Halo and we got the lead engineer from Halo, and Microsoft's like, sure, fork over some money. You suck. So, but yeah, so we paid for it. And though what we did have was that nobody else was using the Halo engine. The folks who are over at Bungie, Jason Jones, and the people who are running the show there, didn't really like the idea of licensing, just because of the support headache that went with it. If they're having enough trouble trying to move through the process of getting Halo 2 out, they really didn't want to deal with the headache of having to support somebody with the Halo engine, since the way Halo did things was very unique. You didn't build in Halo the way you built for like Unreal or Hammer, or what's it called nowadays? Source. Thank you. It had a really different art path, and so there was a training process. And since we had all touched those tools, they're willing to say, all right, you guys can have license, but don't call us. And we did, and we were fine. Matt Seeger was one of the engineers on Halo, so he knew the engine inside and out. So that made it really easy. We just bugged Matt, and Matt told us to shut up, and it worked out. So, was there another part to what you were going to ask? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Oh, actually, I was wondering about you guys approach with a more iterative concept, starting out with small idea and aggregating on top of it.
Yeah. We don't actually make anything into a game until we like it on paper first. So, like I said, there's this process where we have like these one-page treatment sheets where we'll say what the best genre we can associate with it, how it works, define the gameplay in about a paragraph or two. If there's a backstory, give it a little bit of backstory, a little bit of the technology necessary to make it happen, and then why anybody would want to buy this game. And after we've gone over it, a number of these, we kind of decide which ones are things that we think we could pull off, and those get developed even more into bigger documents. We've gotten to a point where we use Wiki a lot for the Wiki. You guys all know what wikis are, right? Okay, that's our design doc tool. It just keeps growing, and everything is on paper. A lot of character design is on paper. Gameplay is on paper. We have to be able to see it in our heads as a solid game before we even commit to any kind of actual visual construction. And then that's only absolute bare minimums. If it's one of the rules is if it's not fun in an empty room, it's not fun. Right? If I'll do a volume model, just kind of like we'll pick if it's a level-based game, we'll pick a space that's representative of what you'll wind up doing through the majority of the game. It'll be like whatever our common verb is, what you do over the course of the game. We're going to set up a space where you can do that a lot. Put some obstacles in there, and by obstacles I mean boxes. And then if it's going to be AI driven, put the bare minimum AI in there and see how it feels. Does that space feel right? Does this play feel right? Is there a good pace here? And then once we like that, then we start working through these iterations. But the iterations only go to a point. We get to a point where we're at a solid prototype. And sometimes we don't even do that. Sometimes we'll have this idea that we'll just go, let's make a WoW video. That is, a video this real high concept that shows how this should feel when you're finished with it. We don't want to go through the trouble of trying to program the whole game, so we'll just make this presentation that says, zip, boom, bang. This is what's happening. This is why this is cool, and watch characters doing what we think players should be doing in that. And that sometimes that will serve as a prototype phase, but eventually we have to get to a point where we actually have something that we can go to publishers and say, okay, sit down with us and play this, and that's a polished prototype. Because we learned early on with stubs that if you make something that doesn't look so hot, and you start telling people, we know it doesn't look hot, but imagine what it might look like. it doesn't work. People only see what's in front of their faces. They start, you say, well, ignore the fact that you can fall off the world. There's going to be a barrier there, and there's going to be all this cool stuff there. And they'll fall off the world. And we'll say, why'd you fall off the world? And they're like, well, I fell off the world. You should fix that. Like, so that's where it ends for a while, because we'll get to that point, and that's what we shop around. This polished demo that's of it's a very minimal selection of what the game's going to be about. There's a very polished product book that we put out that shows you, what the game, why the game is going to be so great, whatever. And we shop it around, and we don't touch the game again until a publisher says, okay, let's go. And this is important because a lot of companies that are close to being independent are more on the side of they take licenses, right? Someone will come to them and say, here's the project we want you to work on, bid for this project. And we're not in that mode. We have a new intellectual property. We want you to help us get this out on the market. And that's how we approach things. This is ours. You get to have a piece of it, but it's ours. And that's what makes it take a little longer for us to shop things around, because a lot of publishers really want to own everything. It makes sense. I mean, if you're a publisher, you don't want to. You want to be able to say, hey, that's hot. I hope you get it out. Now it's mine, and beat it. And we don't want to be in that situation. We want to be in a situation where someone helps us get something to market. They pull in money from sales and maybe some subset of property rights on it. But when it comes to everything else that comes out of that, movies, should a movie happen, it won't be a UE Bowl movie. It'll be movies, film, TV, toys, plush zombies, whatever. That stuff will be all ours, and that's how we'll make our money. So and that's important because that also means that we're beyond just being a straightforward video game company. We're in this weird place of being a video game company plus a weird little production house as well. So there's another hand up back there. Mm-hmm. Right. Everybody hear his question? Or okay. That's a narrative issue, right? That's immediate rest, right? It's start you off in the action and move you forward, and I really think it's a case by case basis. I mean, because not every game is that kind of game, right? From World of Warcraft to The Sims, there are different kinds of games. Some games are toys, some games are stories. And story games, depending on the kind of story you're trying to tell, I think is great. If it's an action game, I'm all for action starting off early, and then kind of powering down, and then kind of just going through various levels of rising action until we get to like climaxes. But again, it depends on the story. If I really want you to feel the impact of what you're doing, it's fine for me to start you off small and incompetent and work your way up to being something special. There's one of the things we actually wanted to do initially with stubs that we didn't have time to do, and there's a bunch of other issues there, but was to let you start the game off playing stubs as a salesman, as a living salesman going into and meeting this farmer, discovering his daughter, having this romantic, this event happen with his daughter, and then getting shot, and just kind of blacking out, and kind of letting you play through that whole process, but make it kind of the cinematic event that you're part of. And I think that's what's more important, is putting you in. If I'm going to put you in an immersive environment, I want to do it in a way that pulls you out as few times as possible. The guys at Valve are really good at that, where once you're in game, you're always moving forward. There's rarely cinematic that just stops the game and says, hey, I'm a cinematic, watch me. It's a cinematic around you, and you're still free to move around. Sometimes your freedom to move around can break that sense of immersion because someone's telling you about the fate of the world, and you're like running around with a gun pointing at their head, going, "Woohoo!" That's kind of dumb, but it is your freedom, and I think that's more the issue is providing you with an immersive experience. It's easier to immerse someone with a big bluff. If I put you in a situation where you have to be extremely active right up front, you don't have the opportunity to waste time. But either one is valid, I think. I don't think you have to start off with a big boss battle. It's fun. I actually prefer not to have boss battles, to be honest. I think boss battles are this metaphor for spatially leveling up that I think is appropriate in some places, but I think people use it way too often. I think finding opportunities to put you in environmental bosses where say that a situation is the boss more so than there's like this thing that you have to deal with. I think that's not done often enough. But I don't know, is that an answer to your question? Okay. Yes, sir.
About yourself and your office.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you're into game development. How into games is your office?
Oh, we're pretty into games. Sadly, I often have to bow out of some of our game activities because I have to go home and deal and do family life. But we all, a bunch of us have our DSs and PSPs, and we sit and play games all the time and talk about games. There's a number of us that are on GameTap playing, researching and playing games all the time. And then there are those of us who go out and buy whatever our money can afford and play it. I'm a pretty avid game buyer. I think I buy at least 2 or 3 games a month, and try to finish them too. That's the hard part. Kind of hard to do when there's a 7-year-old bouncing on your head and a dog peeing on your foot, and there's. But I managed to get through a lot of it. And there is a core group that is kind of more the hardcore. I guess I call it the hardcore game group. There's one of the programmers, Chris MacArthur, a couple of our artists, myself, and Alex plays a lot, but not as often as most of us. He's dealing with business more than he doesn't have as much free time. But yeah, we do a lot of competitive stuff. We do a lot of our playing at home with each other, though. We all have, most of us have of that group have Guild Wars accounts. Some of us have World of Warcraft accounts and play on that all the time. There's some guys who are playing. What's that new Battlefield? Was it Battlefield? Yeah. So there was an attempt to play that this past Friday, and everybody who was playing got slaughtered and said, "Screw it, and I'm not playing this anymore." And that was with the bots. So anyway. So yeah, we play a lot. I play a lot. I especially play with my family. I'm really big on finding ways. I like games as toys, right? There's like narrative games like gentleman back there was kind of referring to. Then there's kind of like things like World of Warcraft and The Sims, where there's kind of like this wandering open content environment. And then there are games that they're really just interactive toys, like Nintendogs, Cooking Mama. I find myself being attracted to those an awful lot lately. And I think partly is because of watching how my daughters respond to these games. There's like this natural way that people play. I'm really into watching how people play. And there's natural ways that people play, and there's these unnatural ways that, I guess, I won't say unnatural, like aberrant ways that most of the people who call themselves hardcore gamers play. If anybody here got kids, you take your kids to the park, watch the things they do. They don't respond to. I think of the park as like this big Grand Theft Auto style content-based environment, right? There's stuff there, and you just run around and interact with stuff. And sometimes the stuff, most times the stuff doesn't even interact back. You just kind of, there's a pole, got to swing on it. There's a swing, got to hang on it. Just kind of, you're doing all this crazy stuff, and it's all about you discovering, you being this auteur of this experience in this space. And it's really this big toy, and I think that's what most common people will gravitate towards, this thing that they can just play around with and have fun with. It's why I think like Nintendogs sold so many units of the DS to people just because it's this wonderful little toy. It's a toy that plays back with you. You kind of tap the screen, a little dog nose comes up and wants to be petted, and it's you get all caught up in it. And you're like, ah, and it's great. It's a wonderful toy. There's a lot of that going on. There were a few even straightforward console games that I would consider to be more toys, where I'm just messing around than I am actually trying to achieve something. And I think that's an important thing to realize that it's possible to have a thing that's kind of like a game, but its goal isn't to put you in a situation where you have to achieve something. Sometimes the goal is just to mess around with it, to see what happens when you play with it. Anybody here ever mess with what's that plankton game? Electroplankton? No? No. If you ever get a chance to, it's a neat little game. It's not even a game. It's a toy. There's like these little fish-like things, and the fish make noises. And as you play around with the fish and the environments the fish are in, they start making different types of noises, and you can eventually get this kind of tubular bell, symphonic, art of noise thing going on. And if you don't know who art of noise is, I've just dated myself. So, yes, sir, in the back. Oh yeah. I think the Wii could really suck. I could get that, take it home, like, oh man, I just wasted $250. But as a game designer, I can see so many different ways that I could, so many different things I can do with that. And some of them are very narrative-driven things. Some of them are just toys, and I think that's cool. I think it's this opportunity to reach out to a crowd beyond the people we've been catering to for years. And that's not to say I don't want to provide for the people who have been buying games for ages and been playing a particular type of game, but realize that games as we know them are only a subset of what we can be doing. There's as we discover new ways to interface with people and ways to make interface more invisible, we're going to find all these really cool things that you can just author and do. And I think the Wii is a step in that direction. And like I said, it could be a wrong step. I could get a Wii and go, man, that could have been cool, but it's not. It sucks. But somebody is going to say, I see how to make that better, and take it that next step, and that's when it begins. Many times I'll go through like GameStops and EB Games and look for the crap games, right? Like the games are like $8, $9, $2, and buy them and take them home and play them. And I do that because somewhere in there was a seed that got lost, and I want to find that seed, see if I can figure out something that can be done with it that's cool. It's kind of like, anybody ever go to like your local video store and you rent like the big blockbuster, and then you go into like the B movie section and you look at like all these crappy B movies, and you're like, all right, I'll rent that. And you rent it just because you want to see how far they go with this goofy idea, and it's going to be bad. But you're there, you're more there for the trip than you are to for the end result. That's kind of where I'm at right now. The Wii is more about the trip for me right now, and I mean that in the travel sense of the word. Sure, one more. Oh, I don't know. Stubbs was actually hard because we didn't have a traditional sci-fi environment. The long corridor with the blue walls with like greebles all along the walls, and something that looks like Halo or Quake or Unreal, right? We had this 1950s world that we were trying to resell. It was a very Art Deco. This is the way the world looked. This is the way people expected the world to look in the future, but in the 50s, right? It was like Disney's Tomorrowland and that kind of thing. And we eventually got buy-in with. So we had some artists in our group, like Mark Bernal, one of the older members of our group, who are old enough to remember those old Flash Gordon serials, the old Buck Rogers stuff, a lot of the old 40s, 50s stuff. So they immediately got the idea, really understood the whole Art Deco bit. But when we started to subcontract, a lot of contractors just did not get it. They just could not understand this. A city of the future. All right. And then, I've got like the Matrix. I'm like, I don't want the Matrix, man. I want something that looks crappy but cool. I want 1950s future. I want, curves and hard angles. But I want Art Deco. I want things that are large planes and things that are garishly colored. I want that. I don't want this thing that you're used to doing. And it was hard because a lot of people have gotten into a pattern of there's a sci-fi world they do, but it's a very common sci-fi world. It's just a variation on the sci-fi world you see everywhere else. And we didn't want to do that. And that just gave people conniptions. It was, what do I do with this? I don't understand what the hell you're talking about. This is crazy. Why don't you just, give them a, rocket car? And, they just, it was like pulling teeth for the early part of Stubbs to get that concept across. And it was hard to find artists who could draw something that was a little more old school and do something old school but make it look kind of new at the same time. We really wanted to get that feeling like you're in an old B sci-fi flick. We wanted Creature from the Black Lagoon. We didn't want, Jason. We would have been happy with Jason from the Black Lagoon, but so that. But once our artists in house kind of understood what was going on, it became easier for the artists to speak to our contract artists and make some of that happen. But eventually it came down to we had to provide. One of the harder things for me to do was I spent a lot of time in Google image search looking for old pictures of stuff, saying I want something that looks kind of like this but not like this at all, and sending hordes of images over and doing this until people understood. So that was hard, and I think that's going to continue to be hard as we try to create environments that are unlike traditional environments. I'm of the opinion that I was saying this to Ward earlier, that we've got technology that lets us make things more and more real. And I think people, the low-hanging grape fruit is to make it more real. But in the old days, there's all kinds of crazy abstract worlds. I mean, I'm sure some of you have played like old Sonic games and things like that, right? Where you're like, what were these people smoking when they came up with this stuff? I would like to see more of that kind of environment. I want to see taking this crazy technology we have now and doing some of these newfangled abstract worlds. And Stubbs was a step in that direction, trying to take this thing that was familiar, but trying to apply some of these weird abstractions to it to make it just kind of just slightly off kilter. So, any more? Yes, sir. You're welcome. Episodic content. I think episodic content is cool. I think most people probably have the wrong idea when they think of episodic content. I played episode 1 of Half-Life. Half-Life episode 1. And then I played the Sin game. And I think those are kind of moving in that right direction. I also played the Sam & Max in GameTap, and that's kind of cool. I think that this idea of getting people to subscribe to an ongoing game is a neat idea. I don't know that a lot of people quite understand what they're getting into when they do it, because, like, I can't imagine if Valve didn't have the resources they already had access to, that they would have made something as complex as episode 1. That could have easily been a standalone game, right? I mean, it was like 4.5, 5 hours. I don't know. I think finding ways to do episodic like that, and then finding ways to do episodic where there's just like ongoing content, where you're given a space that you're playing in, and things. Massive multiplayer games have been doing this for a while, where things kind of change over time, and you're subscribing to the change, and that every time that change happens, you get more stuff. So, Asheron's Call did it, and in my opinion, they did it very well with their first game, and kind of badly with their second game. I think it's viable. I think it's a viable business model, but finding exactly how to do it, I think, is still up in the air. How to do it well, and not dig yourself into a hole. because there's a lot of upfront work you have to do to get the first one out. It's like a comic book, right? I know, if you ever have worked on a comic book, or talk to people who work on comic books, there's like this process where you don't like make issue 1 and ship it, right? You make issues 1 through 4 or 5, and you ship issue 1. That way, you always have this buffer, so you're never caught flat-footed with not having an issue to ship. So it seems to me that for episode of content to work, you need to already have the first couple already made and ready to go. Because if you don't, and there's a long time, like what's happening with episode 2 for I believe that too, but it's still almost a year between releases, and that might as well have been another game at that point. I mean, and that's something episodic needs to come regularly. If you ever get a chance to go back and find some of those old movie serials, like the old Buck Rogers stuff, the old Flash Gordon stuff, that was when the movie world was buying into episodic content, where every couple months there'd be like this half an hour long presentation that was like the story, and it ended the cliffhanger, and then you came back another 1 or 2 months later, and you got the next piece of it. And I think that's what people are aiming at. I think they're kind of missing the mark right now, because the iteration process is way too long. It needs to be right there. It needs to be an episode. It needs to be like a TV series. So how am I doing on time, Ward? Okay. Yeah. Let me see. Not really much to talk about there. We use Max in house. All of our artists are using Max. It's weird because, like I said earlier, most of our dev process revolves around paper first, and we don't necessarily commit to tools really well until we know that we're gonna make the commitment. So what we do is we use Max a lot to rough out shapes, rough out ideas, doing those wild movies where we're presenting the game, the high concept game idea to you. A lot of that's being done in Max, partly with people in house, partly with contractors who can handle animations. A lot of motion capture in that. I guess right now Max is our core tool. We're experimenting with various different engines. Like we're playing around with UE3 to see if that's the direction we want to go. See if it's something that is going to fit our work cycle. Looking at a lot of smaller engines, but pretty much we're at the point where everything stays in concept. I use actually one of my big tools are stickets. Those little pads, just kind of using those, and I have one of those big D&D miniatures kind of rollout pads, and just kind of sketching out ideas on that and playing through ideas with little minis and stuff. And people in the office think I'm crazy, but it works for me. But we don't really have really many hardcore tools beyond Max right now that we focus a lot of effort on. It's not until we actually enter production that's going to be a big issue. But once we do, it's probably going to wind up either being something like Unreal, and focusing a lot on static, less on BSP work, and more on level design with static meshes. But there's not really much for me to say on that right now. Yeah. Okay. Oh, anybody else? Oh, what is it? Yes, sir, back there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was one. Shoot, I can't remember the name of it. But yeah. God bless America. It's obvious I'm not the Max user, right? There is a Boolean-based plugin that was power solids, because it's very easy to lay out spaces with that. We can slap down boxes and join those boxes and not have to worry about. It's very easy to make BSP legal spaces with those Booleans and dump them into Halo. That's something we're still using. We're still using Halo as a prototype tool. And that's important because we learned the lesson of trying not to prototype in the engine that we're going to ship. And that's because you get lazy. You develop habits where you're coming up with an idea, and you develop habits based around ideas, and then when it's time to actually start doing the work, you're like, well, we already did that work. It's already there. Let's leave it alone and keep on going. So you get these things that become legacy problems that are in there that if you are forced to stop and rebuild everything from scratch, you can avoid it. You'd be forced to fix it because it's in your face. So right now we're still using Halo as our big prototyping tool. So when artists do give me something from Max, it goes into Halo, and I make something out of it. Usually a mess, but yeah, Max and Power Solids. Just some. I think some artists use some animation tools, but beyond that, no big plugins. We're cheap. Plugins cost money. We got no money. Ergo, no plugins. Right. What's the second part of your question? Right. Well, go ahead. Oh, yeah. It's funny because when we were shopping stubs around, Destroy All Humans was also being shopped around, and there's a point when we were bumping into these guys going, they're going, hey, and we're going, hey, and then we're all sitting there thinking, well, it's similar, but it's not the same, but it's kind of cool, and I respect that. I think that's, I think there's a current that says we need to do something different, and we need to take some chances with odd ideas. And Destroy All Humans, I think, is an example of one of those odd ideas. Psychonauts, sadly, they didn't do very well, but I think they have like a secondary market now where I think they're like on Steam now. So I think they have a chance to be rediscovered. Just like I think Stubbs is in the process of being rediscovered. But as a direct answer to your question, I think, yeah, I think that's hot. I want to see more of that kind of thing. I don't want to. I don't want to see. I played Gears of War, and I think Gears of War is really cool. But truth be told, I've already played that game 5,000 times. I want to play something that might look like that game, but give me a different game in that game. Give me a different wrapper on that game. I just don't want to look at gray walls and down a sniper scope and if I'm going to have blood spurting, make it creative. By the brain, by the leg, whatever. There's other ways to do it, and there's a rut that I'm seeing people are in because it's easy, and it's easy to train people to do this stuff because that's what people are already used to looking at. So more games like Destroy All Humans, Stubbs, Trauma Center, things like that I think are, and they're a little more accessible I think to not so hardcore gamers because they're not that thing that people associate with the hardcore geek guy who sits around playing, Team Fortress all night. It's different. Makes people go, huh, that's kind of cute, and they try it out. Oh. Yes, sir. I can't see you back there. Well, I think Dead Rising is cool as. Did I say hell? Yeah, I already have. Whatever. I think Dead Rising is cool as hell. And that's another example of taking this concept of zombies. There were a lot of zombie games being shopped around when we were shopping Stubbs. A lot of the publishers told us, "Wow, this is like the 5th or 6th zombie game I've seen." But they were all pretty much variants of Resident Evil. And I think what's cool about Dead Rising is that it really captures what works in a lot of survival-based zombie horror movies, and which a lot of games have missed altogether. And I think that's kind of neat. They're doing cool things. It's very realistic, but it's not doing the same thing everybody else has done. And I think that's cool. So I don't have it, but I would if I could, but I don't. Yes, sir. Yeah, we're thinking about developing for anybody and everybody. No, I haven't. We don't actually have one in the office. I think we recently got a 360 dev kit. We're looking at that. I'm trying to feel our way around that. But PS3 is something that's in our mind's eye of something we want to develop for. We've had a lot of talk about Wii. There are some of us who are more excited about Wii than others. And we also talk a lot about the DS. We talk a lot about the PSP. The only thing about the PSP that kind of makes us nervous is finding out what Sony's real commitment is to it in the long haul, especially now that the PS3 is out. That's kind of somebody's going to lose some money on one side or the other side, and I'm curious to see what happens with that. PS3 is on the list. Whether it will actually happen, I can't say right now. But yeah, yes, sir.
Kind of question that you brought up copy earlier. Things like Steam
Mm-hmm.
as one of the distribution channels.
Mm-hmm.
What impact things that really can have on company model? Because used to be you wanted something went to the store and picked it up.
Right.
Now Steam seems to want to be that store.
I think it makes a lot of publishers who are used to the tried and true distribution methods a little nervous, because the channel is shrinking. You go to Best Buy, you go to CompUSA, you look at their game section, and it's not the game section it was 5 years ago. Partly that's because there's a lot of versions of the same game, but it's also there's the sexy game market is. For people who go out and buy games right now is on consoles. People who do like the type of games that you would buy in the computer store, though, many of them I think are getting tired of that same old game, and they're looking for different versions. And with things like Steam, you have this capacity to deliver something without having to maintain inventory. So if I create a game and I want to ship it, I want to get it out there in the public's hand. I'm not forced to have to make 100,000 units and swallow some of that money if it doesn't ship. There's downloadable delivery systems I think are our way of the future, especially as more people adopt broadband, as broadband starts spreading out across the country and it becomes easier and faster to do. I think it'll be there. And it's more importantly, and I don't know, this is kind of one of my things, it's less cluttered. You know how many game boxes I have sitting around in my basement? I don't want any more. There's old CD cases filled with old game CDs that don't function anymore. It's just stuff, and I don't want more stuff. And as we start moving more towards mobile lifestyles, people are moving away from having stuff and buying boxes of games and stuff. More importantly, buying boxes of games that have a serial number on some sleeve that you didn't see, you already threw it away, is even more frustrating. There's very little anti-piracy stuff when you have to deal with an online deliverable product, as opposed to having to have your CD in the drive every time you power it up. There's something powerful there. It's also powerful, in my opinion, for independent developers. It's this opportunity for indies to have this market that they can deliver to. It's also possible for them to get lost in that market. I mean, what was neat about the store, by going into the store, is you can walk down an aisle and you can see, a horde of games, and even though there might have been a massive game in front of you, it was kind of possible to stand out. Now, with content delivery systems like Steam, you have, the hot games in front of you, and you're going to have to start digging to find a game. And so, unless it's a game that are being played and someone thinks is really hot, it's not going to be in your face. So marketing, I think, becomes a lot more important in that kind of environment. Word of mouth marketing as well as general full-fledged marketing. Yes, sir. Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah.
I'm in the process of making my job real, and the main thing I want to focus on is more 2D animation and character design. That's what I want to do, but I want to show my 3D so I can show what people have to stay current.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a good suggestion on how to break that up, have two separate reels, or is there a good way to mix it together?
I don't know. That's a good question. So I'm not really an artist person. It's kind of hard for me to answer.
If you were doing a job reel, say, if you saw a mix, where it was jumping back and forth or something like that, would you just say this is annoying and turn it off?
If it didn't seem to have a flow that was, if the flow was jarring, it would irritate me and I'd throw it away. But if it's cool, if the visuals are cool, and by cool I mean, they're polished, they're well thought out. It wouldn't really matter to me if they were 2D or 3D, because realize that I guess there is a sensation that being able to do 3D is cutting edge, but there's still a lot of 2D stuff going, especially now as ever gaming and the casual game market are taking off. So there's still room for that. Doing interesting transitions, maybe, where you're showing a character that's been taken to polish as a 2D character, and then showing that character being taken to polish as a 3D character, maybe in the course of an animation. Someone on the paper and getting up out of the paper and doing something, just being creative with it. Not just a reel full of snippets of my cool animation. Just begin with some snippets and then have something that actually has some kind of narrative to it. This shows that you are able to, bring a metaphor to life somehow, and not just make bikini-clad barbarian, whatever. Not that that's what you make. I'm just saying. So I would recommend that you get in contact with some artists in companies. You ever go on CG Talk? Okay, that's a good question to ask on CG Talk. And I think there's like a portfolio section or a work in progress section. I recommend becoming vocal and talking to people and saying, hey, I'm working on a reel, making your first pass of reel, put it up so people can see it, and then get some feedback. There's nothing like getting feedback from people who are doing what you want to do in the industry and saying whether or not what you're presenting would fly in their world. Is it? Sure. One more. That's all right. I'm a designer. I wouldn't call myself a programmer. If it got me more money, I might, but no, I'm not really. I'm a scripter person. I can find my way around C++, but it's an ordeal for me. I'm not a big programming person. People skills. You have to be able to communicate your ideas to people. You have to do two things. One, trying to sell your ideas to whoever you have to sell it to. Being able to communicate that idea to someone is of utmost importance. But also, as just being a designer, I think knowing how people work, knowing how to interface with people is a huge tool. I think one of the things that makes me more comfortable in my job is the number of years I had doing social service work and youth work, because I got to sit down and just get my hands dirty with people, and just kind of get a feel for what people respond to well, what they don't respond to well. Watch the things that people are wishing they could do, and then try to find ways to make that into game. So, people skills is like right there at the top. Being able to write also helps. If you're really in a true design position, not necessarily like level design, but like you're actually coming up with core gameplay, you're going to have to put that on paper. And you're going to have to be able to describe it on paper in a way that people can understand it. And yeah, you can't get by without that. You can actually get by, because I get by without being able to program well, but I couldn't get by if I couldn't do those things. Those things are what makes my job fun. I guess I could do my job and have horrible people skills, but I wouldn't do it for very long. I've been a few programmers who were like that. Few too many. Anyway, is that it? Okay. All right, thanks for having me.